So that
Don't
until
broadcast
clear
until.
Okay, there, yeah, that's fine.
So let's just do those setting things.
Yes.
So I think it's.
So,
So let's untick raise hand.
yeah. And you want gallery view?
Yes.
Yeah. And then
Notepad.
that's fine.
I think that's
That's
all
fine.
fine.
Yeah. Okay. I'll cover this one.
Sticky notes. So that's
What's
what
on
I
this?
That's not fair.
Well, why do you have this? Or sort of begin with this? I mean, sort of folder. Is there anything
Okay.
else?
I think that's probably it, isn't it? And then I just literally press broadcast when you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And when I
Exactly.
want to go, I just mute and hide myself.
Yeah, I think
just
basically
locate.
attendees can't join until you broadcast.
Yeah.
So I would maybe don't start straight away once you start
Yeah,
broadcasting.
yeah. I think give it like 5 minutes or something.
Yeah. If people wanted, obviously they could turn their cameras off. I don't know. I mean, you can have it either way, or just all of you could mute or something. Or you could just talk, have it right.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. Makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, you don't have to stand there staring.
Yeah.
What else?
Oh, I think that's fine.
Cool.
I'm just keeping it very brief at the beginning because I don't think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not actually of interest. You just kind of have to do it.
Yeah, you're just doing like what biophysics and then that's
Yeah, and just
cool.
grab that everyone. So.
Yeah, give me a shout. Have you got your phone? If you just drop me on
Yeah.
WhatsApp or something.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
I guess also at some point I'll be on mute, so
Oh yeah, that's
people
true.
can actually come in and out then if
Cool.
need be.
Sweet.
All right.
you? Good, how are you? Well, I'm okay. Good. It's
That's okay. Ooh, I like it. I haven't seen
Yeah?
that before.
yeah, I'm not sure about it. I had a little bit of a mental breakdown because now it changes how all my clothes look. But hey ho, it's okay. We'll get there. Thank you. Hi.
Cool. How is it for me speaking? Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, it's fine. It's very good.
Good volume, so I think that's all good.
Yeah, my internet's okay.
Yeah, I think we're okay from here.
Okay.
Cool.
I might just get. I was just coming. I'm not leaving the zoo. I'm gonna get something to drink. But I was just checking to make sure that everything was okay.
Yeah.
My cats are definitely gonna come and pester us.
I think everybody enjoys that.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
This one. Wish we had like a. It's okay. Doesn't matter. I don't want to care too much. I'm just gonna get a drink. I have a clean mug.
Yeah, with the images, basically, I'm gonna do like an introduction to both of you, and then I'll kind of be muted. But if you want, when you want the images to be shown, I can just share the screen from here, and if you just be like, point me to whichever one, and I'll just kind of click on it to make it larger. Does that work?
Oh, I think so. I don't think I really listened to you. My mind went elsewhere.
Sure. So yeah, if you want any images to come up on the screen, just kind of say to me. I'll like kind of come off the screen once the talk begins, but obviously I'll be here, so you can just say, let's look at this image, and I can put it up, and then because there's like a selection, you can direct me to any, and I'll click on them.
I thought the way that we do it is that you would listen to us speak, and if you think there's an image that's relevant, like if I mention a painting title, you should just bring it up.
Okay, sure, I can do that.
I think that makes more sense because I obviously won't talk about all the works. I actually also know that we've only covered recent works, but maybe that's better anyway to keep it more concise. I do wonder if we should have some images for reference of previous works, because I might say as before. But
okay, at the moment I've only got these ones, so I'd have to. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Good. You
too. Glad I found that unique link because I got it rough right at the last second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we met at Miami last year, Alex, but I don't know if you remember.
I do, of course. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the booth.
So yeah, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for setting this up.
Yeah, we're very excited. I was just having a quick discussion with Jade about talking about works, because I can share them from my screen. I'll kind of disappear once you guys start talking. But yeah, at the moment I only really have. I mean, Jade, would you want to be looking at earlier works? I've only got the ones I sent you earlier today.
in all honesty, I enjoy the luxury of not really trying to control it too much. So I think if we are speaking and you think something's relevant, I really trust you. Just
Okay. I might not do it too much because I think it could be a bit, because it's sort of sharing from different speakers, it might end up being a bit disruptive, but I guess we can see how it goes.
I think also we can also mention that, you know, if people do want to see certain works, there'll be a way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too important. And I was going to say something I've forgotten. No, it's left me. Wait, so once it hits 4 o'clock, do people just see us automatically?
No, so I have to press the button.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. What I say now. Yeah. No, I think that's. I didn't go to Tate Britain today. You might have found out, Alex, that.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I did not go to the Tate Britain today in the end.
That's okay. There was a painting from Milan that you had mentioned.
Yes, I forgot about that. I think I will be able to find it because it is in my favorites now. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure in how much depth I would be able to talk about the painting itself, but I'd be able to talk about the experience for sure. See.
I was going to say when we kind of open that perhaps the two of you will speak for about 40 minutes and then leave 20 minutes for questions. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
And do you want to just kind of ignore the time and for me to kind of come back in about the time when you might want to sort of bring things to a close, or would you prefer to sort of not be interrupted and to keep an eye on it?
Sorry, I can't see it.
I can see sort of the habit and a garland.
Yeah. Did I not save the name of?
Catherine, how are we sounding, looking? Everything's fine? Is my background blinding you?
No, I can hear you both very well and good.
Moving.
But yeah, just about towards the end, do you want me just to kind of come in at about the 40-minute mark at a sort of good time and say, you know, shall we do some questions now? So I don't know whether you prefer to kind of not have to think about the time in that way, or would you rather you to look at
maybe we can have a minimum time and a maximum time. I think that might be better. I don't know what you think, Alex, but I do know sometimes conversations can run a bit over. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have I usually like, because there's the computer and it's so annoying, I have my eyes on like different things. So I'll kind of know what time it is. And Jade, also, if you're on a roll, like I'm certainly not gonna cut you off, you know what I mean? Yeah. But if if the bread is baked, then I'll take, we can take it out of the oven kind of thing.
And then,
so I think absolutely intervene, Catherine, if you think it's going too long.
Yeah,
no, the only other thing I was going to say was just with questions at the end, I'm going to ask people, they can just type them in and I'm happy to select them unless one of you two want to do that. But are you happy for me to select them or would you like to?
I'm happy for you to select them. It doesn't mean that I won't be. I'm joking. You can select them. I was going to make a bad joke. I trust that you'll select questions that you think are the most interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Of course.
And Catherine, I believe that you're prepping introductions. I haven't prepped like a drafted introduction, so I'm assuming that
so
you are.
I'll introduce both of you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody feeling ready to go live?
I will warn you, my cat's already looking at me. She's dragging her toy right here.
I think the one other thing is that we probably won't start immediately because we'll have to give people a bit of time to enter the room. So I think we'll just be around, and I guess if we want to just chat or whatever, but yeah, I think we'll have to give people just a few minutes just to get in.
Okay. Okay. But will they be able to hear us?
Yes. But you can mute yourself for that time if you like. Or even we can have our screens blank for that moment, and I can just, because I'll be able to know how many people are here and when's.
Oh yeah, that's very mysterious. So we can start with our.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Wait. Let me do it too.
And then have like a dramatic unfurling.
Okay, so are we happy? I'm gonna make us live now.
Well,
Cool, all right. All right, I think maybe we should begin in a sec. Jade, do you want to come through? Okay. Yeah, we'll start in a sec. I think there's a couple of people still joining. Cool, brilliant, we're here. All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to this conversation today between Alex Gartenfeld and Jade Fadojutimi. I'm really happy that so many of you have been able to join us today. We're very lucky to have Alex and Jade, that they're able to come together today, and I'm sure it's going to be a really fascinating discussion. I'm just going to give a quick introduction to them both. Alex Gartenfeld is the artistic director at the ICA Miami. In this role, he has curated many projects, including surveys for Terry Adkins, Thomas Baylor, Larry Bell, Judy Chicago, Shannon Ebner, Paolo Nazareth, Sterling Ruby, Ettore Sostas, and Andrea Oserta, among many others. He co-organized the first showing of major early works by Donald Judd and a spotlight on late works by Senga Nagudi. Forthcoming solo exhibitions are for the work of Geneva Ellis, Harmony Korine, Michelle Mayeras, and Hugh Hayden. And Gartenfeld was the co-curator of Songs for Sabotage, which was the 2018 New Museum Triennial. So yeah, thank you for joining us today, Alex. And moving on to Jade. Jade Fadojutimi is a London-based artist. She holds a BA from the Slade School of Fine Art and an MA from the Royal College. Pippi Holdsworth Gallery, that's us, we presented her first solo exhibition in 2017, and this was followed by a solo institutional exhibition at Pier London in early 2019. Following her second solo exhibition, which has just closed at the gallery here, Gesture, and I think Jade and Alex might speak about this a little. Jade has solo exhibitions next year at the Hepworth Wakefield and the ICA Miami. She will also be included in the 2021 Liverpool Biennial. And Jade is currently the youngest artist to have work in the Tate's collection. Her work is also held by the Baltimore Museum of Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Walker Art Center, and of course the ICA Miami. So yeah, great. Thank you both for being here today. I think Jade and Alex are going to speak for roughly about 40 minutes, and then there will be time for questions. If anybody does want to ask questions, please feel free to just pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll come to them at the end and hopefully get through as many as possible. Great, so I think that's everything from me, and yeah, let's hand over to Jade and Alex.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks also, I guess, first and foremost to Pippi, as well as to Poppy and the whole gallery for putting this together, and all the support that you provided to myself and I think to Jade as we've been starting to work on a few projects. I am one of the few people probably on this whole Art Basel OVR who is in Miami. And I mention that, one, because I hope that we can welcome you next year, and we'll be working on an exhibition of Jade's work, which we can talk about, and which will comprise new works. We're very proud to be able to support Jade's work, her extraordinary work in painting, through our collection as well as our exhibitions. It's working with artists who are at crucial points of their career is something that's really super significant to us and very meaningful. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this exhibition unfolds. Last reason I mentioned Miami is because we have a work of Jade's from our collection on view now. And it is, for those of you who are there, it is a really beautiful, lush painting that we acquired about a year ago. And I hope we'll have the opportunity, to talk about it a little bit as well. But first and foremost, Jade, thank you for being with us. It's exciting. And Catherine did, I think, a really good handoff, which was about your exhibition Gesture, which was more than slightly impacted by the quarantine. And I think that this is one of the first opportunities that you'll have to speak about it. This was a suite of, I think, 6 largely paintings that you made for the gallery. I think a really kind of amazing step in your practice. One place among many that I'd want to begin is, I think your titles are so fascinating, and specifically the word gesture. I brought up, I guess, a lot of things in this introduction, but one of the places where I would ask you to start is specifically with that title and the J that you used to begin the word.
Yeah, hello everyone. And yeah, the title Gesture for me was really symbolic of the physicality of making the work, as well as the thought process behind putting out a show during a sensitive time like this, as well as kind of highlighting, I'd say, the absurdity of the simultaneous realities of making work and being here during a pandemic, being here during more emotional times, especially. And so for that show, I started involving pastel in my work, as some people might know, and just the physicality of using the hand directly into the paintings, with drawing in with pastel or oil sticks, or however you want to refer to them, felt like a gesture in itself from myself directly to the paintings, and having that conversation with them. And then also, I guess it's a layered title in the sense that, the gesture of putting on a show during a time like this as well. I was kind of questioning that through the title. And then as well, I like a bit of humor. And I feel like the whole thing felt a bit ridiculous, a bit absurd, a bit funny. And I was making, before the show, before that I hung the show, I had made a couple of works, and there was a painting that has kind of started this whole, this whole body of work with the paintings themselves, including pastel, and it made sense for me to call that painting Gesture. So there's a painting actually that exists that is called Gesture.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the many people who unfortunately only saw the work online, which looked, as I said, really stunning, and took on I think a new color palette, for instance. But I think also one of the things that we don't get from seeing your work online is a sense of scale. And you've talked about your works previously as environments, and because this was such a peculiar time to be making work and to be describing environments, I wonder how that unfolded for you, kind of as a physical experience of making the paintings.
That's interesting, actually, because I think, especially because, I started these paintings during our lockdown, and I always describe myself making these paintings during lockdown. But I have to admit, my lockdown personally, I think in the UK, our lockdown was from March till July, but my personal lockdown was from March until September. I think I experience a lockdown in some ways whenever I'm making a show. And so in the run up to the show, the way I'd been living was the same as we had been during the lockdown. And it's quite interesting to make paintings in a time where I couldn't travel as much, where I couldn't see as much in terms of distance away from the space that I'm used to, and kind of bring the outside world in a way. But that outside world was more entangled with my imagination. And one of the wonderful things I found from during my lockdown or our lockdown was how expansive my imagination had become in a way, because I was seeing, even though my days felt more monotonous in a sense, they also were absorbing a lot more information and translating them differently, and also translating an idea of nostalgia. And so in terms of scale, it was fascinating to make works in a scale that I could, in a sense, if I wanted to, in a dream world, walk into them in a time where I couldn't actually go much further than the radius between my home and my studio. Yeah, I think, did that answer your question?
I mean, absolutely, and I think also kind of pointed to a few really important themes in your work. The first, I think that one of the first things you mentioned was that this was the first time that you used oil stick or pastels in your work. And I have to say, as somebody who's thinking about your work, that actually surprised me, just because this kind of imbrication of color and line is so crucial to kind of what is so fascinating about your work. But I wonder kind of why now, what brought you to this new medium format?
It's a mixture of things. I'd say, first of all, I am definitely the type of person to obsess over one thing for a very long time. And I do feel like I've been obsessing over liquid since I started the Slade in 2011. But at the same time, at the beginning of the lockdown, I think for the whole of March, I didn't go to my studio. And I decided I was going to stay. It wasn't a decision, it was more out of fear. But I was going to stay at home and make work from home. And the room I'm in right now is kind of my makeshift home office that I did up during the lockdown. And I really wanted to make, but I didn't know how to translate that making to a space where there's no door, so my cats can come in wherever. I'm sure maybe you guys can hear one munching away under the table. But yeah, where I could make work practically as well. And I would be in all day and I'd be drawing, but I think the involvement of the pastels came because a while ago I did a project with, I think it's, oh goodness, UN Women's Art movement. I might be getting the title of that slightly mixed, muddled up, but in order to make this fabric piece, I had used pastel on tracing paper to kind of figure out how to layer on top. And so I had pastels lying around, but I'd use them for one singular purpose and kind of push them to the side quite naturally. And then whilst I was here every day, they were sitting in front of me, and I just started to pick them up. And once I started to pick them up, I really enjoyed the movement of them, the back and forth. It was a lot of I wouldn't say scribbling, but the motion of using the pastel. I now look at it retrospectively as it was also really soothing for probably a lot of anxiety that came with the unknowns of this pandemic, especially right at the start. But then once I started and I enjoyed it, I didn't enjoy picking up just my coloring pencils or just my markers. And so I started ordering these sets of pastels. I think you get 200 in a whole set. And they became a way for me to also invite color into the work, because I had this direct access to color visually in front of me, which I could just pick up. Yeah.
And I know that your studio practice is, the centerpiece of what you do, and has what you've described as kind of dance-like element to the way that you paint, create, move around the studio. I wonder, if the pastel has impacted that dance, or if you had a different sort of type of approach, given that new material.
I think it has, definitely. I think I'm still learning about it every day. I think the gesture as a show was the start of my engagement with the material, and I'm using it now and learning more about different ways. I think the way it impacted the kind of physicality with making my paintings is how often they break. And I'm one that I don't get upset if my pastel breaks in the middle of painting, but it definitely does take, an open way of thinking to think, okay, how do I get around this, and how do I approach this? So I feel like I definitely found myself, bending down more often to pick up the pastels. But actually what was really exciting was once I started working with a particular type of oil pastel, and I was finding, okay, these pastels aren't as strong, I started looking into more different types of pigment sticks in general. And I guess they connect me quite closely with the work in a different way. I'm more with my face to the canvas when I'm working.
Yeah, and I mean, because we're in your studio, and aside from your cat behind you, we also have a selection of drawings. Never having seen your works on paper exhibited, aside from, I think, the edition that you were mentioning, how does a drawing practice factor into these paintings, which I think also have this very important process of instantaneous drawing to them?
They operate in so many different ways for me. One of them is I see them just like I keep my, I have a thing for sofas, so I have quite a few sofas in the studio. I love dolls, I love plants, I love fabrics, so there's clothes, there's rugs, and those things operate in the studio in the same way my drawings do. I look at them in a moment of painting, or my eyes catch them quite naturally, and so I will have a reaction, and that reaction can involve itself in the work I'm making in that moment. So my drawings for me can be notes for the paintings, but they're not made with the purpose to create a work. And they're also wonderful exercises of thought, and they become, a tutor at RCA, Philip Allen, he was the one that really got me into drawing. I was so against drawing for a long time because I was such an intuitive painter, or that's how I used to describe myself. So I'd always go straight into a painting. But he made me think of drawing differently, as when you don't have the urge to get up and paint, draw. And if you can't draw, find a way to draw that is the most comfortable for you. And I think I discovered that with my journey, with my work. So yeah, they play different roles for me.
And just in terms of, because you mentioned a little bit your education, have you always drawn in this style or at all, or what brought you to painting, particularly painting, kind of in that abstract figurative vein that you do?
I wouldn't say I'm hesitant to use the word style because I prefer language. I think style is quite, I think you operate within a style and your language has the power to grow and evolve over time. And I think my language, the timing of when I started drawing was the same timing of when I went to Japan for the first time, and these works started with the beginning of the story for my whole career in a way, actually. And I think that language of my drawings definitely started up my relationship with my paintings. I made 30 drawings at the end of my time in Kyoto, and they were the beginning of this language. And then they informed my paintings. And I think so for the past 3 years, I've been working with this language, and it has been growing and changing a lot.
And travel, you've mentioned, is such a big part of your practice, which may be surprising to some audiences who see your work as purely abstract. For instance, that there would be kind of an observational and personal quality in the images. I bring that up just because I know that the next project that you're working on is for Takaishi, and I think it's your first real exhibition in Japan, one that I think perhaps unfortunately you may not be able to go to, although I think maybe the jury is out. But I wonder how that contention as well as that context is informing kind of the work that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think living is a big part of my work. I have to live in order to work. And I don't mean that in a literal sense. I mean, my life flows into my work a lot. And travel, for me, travel started mainly with Japan. And then as I've gotten a lot more opportunities, I found myself going to many different places, Cologne quite often because I have a gallery there, Gisela Capitan, as well as, I've been to Italy a few times. And then I go away with my parents. And I think that when I engage with something, it happens so naturally and so instinctively that I find myself taking photos a lot, or wanting to buy something because it has resonated with me in some way or form. And I think my travel has really helped me collect a lot of realizations about myself and the things that I'm drawn to. Now that it's gone, it hasn't necessarily gone or temporarily stopped. It hasn't necessarily actually changed my engagement with my work in a sense. I'm not looking for tools to use. It's just my scope of sight has narrowed, but I've definitely absorbed a lot more information. And Japan as a place has always been extremely important to me. It started my relationship with myself through Japanese animation.
And you ask about the animation.
And so I used to go to Japan specifically, once a year for my work. Once I went the first time for my exchange, for a longer period of time, I had seen its effect on me and I wanted to return to it quite often. And now I go, before Corona, I was going 3 times a year, but for shorter periods of time because having a gallery there changed my relationship with the place as well. But yeah, travel, I think I travel through my paintings too. I think you can travel within yourself too. You don't need to literally leave your home to travel. I think I have many forms of travel for myself.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about some of the works recently, and I know that not all the visitors or all the viewers that we have now are necessarily have the images in front of them, but I'm thinking of, for instance, from your last show with Pippi, the image Birthday, Death Day, which strikes me as particularly restrained in its composition, but also quite floral and quite symbolic in a way. And, as you're talking about time or place or memory, perhaps we could hone in on that painting in particular, or any other if you don't want to talk about that one.
I mean, we can talk about it. I'm surprised you picked that one. I'm really happy you picked that
Oh
one.
yeah? Why are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised. And I say I'm excited more because that painting is so different from the rest of that body of work, if it is a body of work. And I feel it is one of the most simple, I wouldn't say simple, I say there's less busy paintings in terms of formal elements. But the title of that painting I really enjoy a lot. And I remember when I can't remember who I told that title to, and and I was like, oh, that's a harsh title. But I love the title of that painting in particular, because I'm not sure if I'm not sure how to start going into it. I think there are definitely parallels to the experience of this pandemic. If we want to let it be as open as possible. But at the same time, I remember, this pandemic actually started just after my birthday. So I celebrated in London and I happened to celebrate in Cologne, and I got back home and we were in lockdown. So it has a personal relationship with me. And I was saying to someone the other day that it's quite interesting. I turned 27 and now I'm soon going to be 28, and I don't really feel like I even experienced my age. But in terms of the second half of the title, Death Day, I actually see that title as quite positive, because I think that it's interesting to only draw connections to birth. And I think I at least feel like I'm constantly being reborn through, my own self-realizations. And it's kind of trying to highlight a really wonderful recycle within myself, or and in this moment. And I think I think it's also, I think where I'm going with this ultimately is that I don't want to be insensitive to also people's struggles right now as well. And I think the flip between two states is quite beautiful in that title and in that work. And for the work itself, and when you look at the work, it was an association with that painting once it was finished. Oh, I think I titled that actually in the middle. Yeah.
Well, it is, I mean, not to be simplistic, it is a sort of spring-like painting almost. There is like a blossoming kind of element to it, aside from a restraint, like a more kind of muted, very kind of open color palette. On the flip side, sort of more or less, because I would say that in the show, it struck me that there are a few techniques that you're using compositionally, because there are a few more kind of restrained, or I'll use the word symbolic kind of, but there's also a kind of a net-like quality, which you use in a number of your paintings, veils, voids. I guess one of the things that I guess struck me first about when I saw your work was, how persuasive you create a kind of experience using an all-over form of the net. And that drew me to the painting in particular, Obsession, which is, you spelled out, or obsession, which is a fuller painting, sort of, it almost feels like elements of it are trickling down the canvas, but it has a kind of all over quality to it. Perhaps you could walk us through that title among other elements of the painting, because I guess I also just thought, there is this kind of, hard vacui sounds like a kind of a negative word, but that's not how I mean it, but there is a kind of such a fullness to a lot of your compositions as well.
Yeah, I think that that painting, the title really kind of translates my relationship to making that painting. I think that painting, although, I have a certain pace with my works just because of the way I think, I did spend a lot longer with that painting than most paintings that were in the show. And I think what I find when I'm really excited by a work or a particular moment in the work, I like to embrace it fully. And so that net you're talking about, if I'm translating you correctly, is more, I would say it's more of an episode of fascination. That happens with, I feel like each painting has its own net in that sense, but I don't know whether to talk more about the painting or the title, because I think the painting as a physical painting in terms of color, in terms of, I was thinking a lot about color theory, or let's switch that around. I think that whilst making that painting, I was reminded a lot about color theory, and you know, how to play with someone's eyes, play with my eyes, to be honest with you. I always like to disrupt myself and obsess over certain moments. And in this particular painting, it was interweaving color, interweaving veils, interweaving, until it became so chaotic that you couldn't focus on one element without getting distracted to another by another. And I love painting like that, and I do it for myself more than anything. I feel like a lot of my paintings are having these moments, especially of these like colored dots, where I've noticed how they react, how they change your relationship with your eyes when looking at the work. And I think it's something I've noticed when I look around my spaces, like there'll be pockets of color and I can't stop I keep engaging with it because it's there. It's like when you leave, I don't know, I was going to give you an analogy. When you're leaving a museum and there's a painting that you really don't want to leave, but you have to leave because you've got to get somewhere to be, and you keep looking back and forth at it. I feel like these pockets of color do that for me. And that painting obsession has these, I remember, orange circles,
yes,
at the tips that are meant to like steal your eye, but then you go back in a lot.
Yeah. Now those really, actually, it's interesting. I mean, those two kind of red dots in the middle of the composition struck me as rather unique in your work, because they seem, your work, which probably most people, and especially myself, who experience a vast majority of your work online, there is a very material quality to your work. Fields of transparency and opacity. There is actually sometimes a thickness to the material, and I'm just talking about the one painting that we have on view, you know, at the museum. But it struck me that this, you know, your work is so immediate. These two dots, just as one kind of example, seemed like an episode that came later, which seemed somewhat of an anomaly in your painting process.
The two dots in the center, I actually have to say, were there in the middle. And when I'm painting, it's not even an attempt to. I think I love to listen to my paintings. Sometimes you can see forms evolving and you just have to embrace them. And I think those two dots were me embracing something I had seen in the painting that probably most people wouldn't see. And I'm not going to say what it is to me, because I believe the works are a space, they should remain open visually. But I think it might, yeah. Oh gosh, I'm struggling because I don't like to give too much away about the work if I don't think it's important for the viewer. So I might have to just retract on that one. So, yeah.
Without asking you too much, there's I mean, there are so many really evocative titles in this exhibition, and I mean, I actually like to go painting first, title last, I think but this one I mention in particular just because it's entitled "Thank You, My Love, I Would Never Have Discovered It Without You," and it is also, to my eyes, a diptych. And so I wanted to, it seemed like there was a kind of a symmetry between the title and the painting that might not exist in other works, and it really stuck out to me as well.
Yeah, I'm getting shy now.
You can make it up. It's about gesture and performance anyway.
I mean, I'm going to be completely honest about that work, because I fell in love this year, and a lot of love has gone into myself and the paintings and the person I'm in love with, and that painting is really special to me. It is a hybrid in the sense that I started it just before the pandemic and I completed it during the pandemic. And there's this pillow in don't want to say the person's name because I don't want to publicly. But there was this pillow. I was doing FaceTimes a lot with the person I love, and there was this wonderful pillow behind his head constantly, and I was obsessed with this pillow, and it was really the start of this painting. And that painting was a painting of gratitude to this person and the life they've given me, and also it taught me a lot about love, and there was a lot of love whilst painting that work in general. Yeah. I'm getting embarrassed because I don't usually show my personal life, but I think it's interesting to watch the story, well, because I know my own story, to watch my story through my works as well. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there.
No, I think that's generous, and congratulations. There's another, I mentioned this not in order to tease out information from you, but there's another, but rather to point to something, which is there's another painting that is called, All My Muscles Have Pillows, which seems evocative of the same spirit. But I guess what it points to me is that, or points out to me is that writing or poetry is clearly such a big part of how you consider and conceive of your paintings. And that kind of begs the question, is there a companion writing process, and how does that come into this quasi-spontaneous production of kind of your painting?
Yes, there is. I write just in the same way that I decide a next mark on the canvas. It is a reaction to thought, and I will often put down my paintbrush to suddenly write down something I've realized or heard in my own head, and yeah, they happen simultaneously, and I've been doing it for a while and I really enjoy it. It's interesting to see how the paintings and the writings kind of evolve together. But something interesting that I think that happened during lockdown, which is relevant to All My Muscles Have Pillows, is I noticed that maybe it's something to do with speaking to people less or seeing people less. I felt like my inner monologue had become external, even in speaking. So I found myself starting to note down things I was saying out loud, and collecting these quotes. And one of those was All My Muscles Have Pillows. And my partner was also noticing my like external writing. So I also started recording myself a lot more, because I found that actually I was starting to speak a lot more as well as write. I still write the same amount, but I guess I was speaking to myself a lot. I think I've started speaking to myself a lot more. But the writings, I don't even know if I call them poetry or I call them thought. I think I definitely think the way I write. I'm definitely quite the romantic. And I also have these collection of messages for myself, for the work, for other people that gather in my head that I just need to express. So sometimes they can enter the paintings as well, and sometimes they just remain within my notebooks or on my phone.
Do you think of these writings in a kind of authentically personal or diaristic sense, or as a construct of your work that kind of lives in companion to you and your everyday life?
I would say that's an interesting question. I would say the writings for me can operate the same way as the paintings. They exist as themselves, but they inform each other. That's for sure, because I inform each of those and I create both of them. We're all connected. I'm going to stop there.
It's all good, and I have actually pushed you in perhaps an overly kind of personal direction in terms of interpreting the work, because your work is so open. I think what's one of the kind of real accomplishments of the work to date is how open and how communicative it is in so many directions. You mentioned color theory, which intrigued me just because I've never heard you necessarily speak about it before, and I would actually be interested in following that line. But I guess just in the opposite direction perhaps of poetry and love is, your paintings invoke also, perhaps a remote way, networks. And you've spoken about communication, but also inevitably technology. And I wonder, of those kind of buffet of references I just laid out, is there any that feels particularly kind of true to you?
Sorry, what was the last part?
Does this kind of reference to networks or to, I'd say, the impact of technology on you and your everyday life, does that ring true in terms of how you think about making your work?
I don't know what generation I technically am, or whether this is just singular to me, but I'm not that involved in technology is not something I necessarily associate with myself too much, because I dip my toes in, but then I dip them out and I go and do something else and I dip my toes back in. They're a way for me to access the information and my soundtracks and my animation, but I'm not sure how much it has informed me. But oh gosh, I was gonna say something based on what you were saying, and but one thing I am interested in when you said networks is conversations, and I think conversations are really important. I have conversations all the time through my work with myself, and I've noticed how having conversations builds ideas, but also connects us with people, connects us with ourselves, connects us with our environments. I think there's so many different ways to converse than literally having a conversation with the person in front of you. And I'm always thinking about how my works converse with each other as well as myself. But also I've been thinking a lot, especially during the lockdown, about how we have our own, how we kind of define ourselves in the ideas we have or the morals we have. But we don't necessarily think about the conversations that have gotten us there. And so every time I'm titling something, every time I'm painting something, I'm always questioning why. I'm always questioning, I don't think there's a limit to how deep you can question something. And it's really interesting what it unravels. And I feel like, for me, that's how my work communicates with me and hopefully the world, because I feel like I've just got a bit grand there. With other people, because I think that I'm trying to embrace that message myself even more and more. I've noticed how indulging in myself in a way has only made me want to spread, and spread. Maybe spread's not the right word. There's a quote I have that I think is. I love to sweat, or I love to swell. I want love to push past my belly in order for it to spread. And I think that's all to do with connection. I think with my paintings, I'm extending branches to myself and other people. And I hope they can become spaces for people to have a thought, whatever that might be, and then to carry that thought. Maybe that's a grand idea. Maybe that's a grand message. Maybe in a few years, I'll be having different conversations with myself. But right now, that's where my thought process is at.
Well, I think it's a really striking kind of binary in your work, that your work is so immersive and can be kind of an environment unto itself. But inevitably, context is important. And you live in London, your studio's in Bermondsey. You've recently had some changes to your studio. We were speaking yesterday. I don't know necessarily how publicly you would want to necessarily share this, but you shared it with me, which is that this idea of a conversation is becoming a part of your studio practice, and interdisciplinarity and the point at which your paintings reach the world is becoming more important to you. Is that something you'd want to elaborate on, or is it too soon?
I will say as much as I know at this moment, because everything's so early. But the story of the studio was actually even interesting too, well, to me at least. But, we were, before the pandemic, we were working with the idea that the show with Pippi was going to be in June. And I was working on some ideas, and it required me to have a delivery of something. And we couldn't store it in our studio. We had 2 spaces in a shared studio block. And I started to realize, you know what, I've been thinking in my plan, at some point I will change studios, but maybe it'll be in 2 to 3 years. But suddenly we had to start storing things in a storage outside, and I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. If I'm having to pay for external storage, then maybe we should start looking. So I had a meeting with my team, and I was like, okay, in a 2 to 3 months, we're going to get a new studio. We're going to start looking, we're going to start thinking about what it is we want, but forgetting what kind of person I am, which is very spontaneous. And, and so I had a little cheeky Google. I was like, oh, but let's see what kind of things are available. And I stumbled across this space, which I've moved into now, which is 3,000 square feet, 5 times the size of my last space. And all of a sudden we're in the midst of this build project whilst I'm making the show for Taka and having other commitments. And it's become and the space has also inspired me and inspired us as a team as well, because I've been talking a lot about conversation. And as the space is growing, I'm noticing things about myself. I'm noticing how the aspect of creating environments isn't singular to my painting. It exists around me, and it's really exciting to be working with a new space that I can do almost anything to. And so we're tiling it, we put wooden floors in. It's still going, maybe it'll finish in March, I doubt it. I keep adding things to the project. But one thing that was really wonderful is that I've always wanted to, I've always wondered whether, the conversation that we're having, for example, the conversation that, or that I have through my work with people that go to see it, whether it is something that is only accessible through the moments that we speak, or I have a show, and I've always wondered if that's a shame, because when you talk about context as well, I think that painting has given me a lot of lessons about myself, and I think that lessons that I found through painting are not singular to that context. And so I've wanted to kind of figure out a way to use the space as a space of culture, and a space of, I don't know, conversation, a space of love. Or maybe I'm becoming really spiritual through this pandemic. And work with younger people, have internship programs. It's just ideas and ideas piling on top of each other, but in a way that translates my being and what energy I want to spread in a way. And it's such a young idea in a way. But I've wanted to do it from the first moment that I started teaching. I wanted to connect more with students. I wanted to connect more with people with disabilities. I just want to, I don't know, give in some way. If that is something that interests people, and if I am someone that people want to connect to. But sometimes I wonder about the exclusivity. Okay, we know what I'm trying to say. of access to the artist's mind in a way, and because I actually feel like a lot of the thoughts I've had about my work and my relationship with it has come with the people, my friends, conversations with them, meeting random people when I am traveling, meeting. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop.
No, good. I'm gonna ask you one kind of last, almost obligatory question before we turn over to the audience for a few questions, which is, you are a young person on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z, I guess I was, despite your ambivalence about technology. But I wonder, in that spirit, if there are any, painterly or other heroes that you have, or I think what your work is, is very full of reference, although quite original in itself. And it's clear, I mean, from your conversation today and all the conversations you have, that painting is so central to your vocabulary and your language and your life. So I wonder who, if there are, any kind of figures that you're thinking about on a regular basis.
Okay, I will be repetitive, but I'm also going to add on, because I did think of some more. Because I always get asked this question, and I obsess over things. So, you know, my favorite artist is still Miki Kokudo, and Laura Owens is very dear to my heart as a journey, especially as a student. But also, I remember when I went to the Tate and I got obsessed with Sigma Polka because of how different every work was. And, you know, when I'm at the Tate Britain, I love to look at a bit of Sargent and David Hockney and Matisse as well. Just as some, I think that the way I look at art is a bit like how I find my music, in the sense that I can like just one song, but I might not like the whole artist. And I'm pretty sure there are more pockets than that. But even at school, I loved Phoebe Unler's work, and she is still a tutor there. And then I remember I had a phase. It's not a phase. I still love Nara Yoshitomo as well. But I could probably list forever, to be honest.
I think the polka reference is really fascinating to me. I've always, and never not asked you before, but I've always, one reference, and I wonder how you feel about it, is I've always thought of kind of Charlene Van Heil's work a little bit. For some of the reasons that you mentioned other artists' work, which is kind of a resistance to signature in some of the works. Also, sometimes the way that kind of voids or fields appear in the work, and I wonder if she, certainly a painter that I admire very much, is somebody who you've spent a lot of time thinking about.
I wouldn't say a lot of time compared to the others, but it's interesting you mentioned that, because I do have quite a few Charlene Van Heil books in my studio, and I definitely have looked at her, and I do love her work a lot. And I definitely, when I started working with Gisela Capitan, I had more access to the things she'd done and saw her work more often. And I really do think that things can enter you abstractly. I might not sit there with books and books on her reading, but she's within my memory 100%. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it for my questions. Jade, thank you. First of all, it's always awkward to do a clap snap, but thank you so much for your generosity and for your commitment to creating dialogue around your work. Really, thank you, and such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was fun talking.
Catherine, if you don't mind, I see some questions in the Q&A. I myself don't necessarily know how to handle that. So,
so I'll start with the first one, but if anybody else wants to type any more questions in, we can get to some more questions as well. The first one, the question for the time being is, would you ever consider applying your poems into your painting? I guess that could be interpreted in a few ways, but yeah.
I think they already are, but abstractly. I think that there is that communication. I think language can translate into painting through painting. It doesn't need to be visibly present as language, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And actually, well, I don't know if anybody else, we've only had one question so far, so if anybody else wants to type one in. Just one, one second. Sorry, and in terms of transcripts and so on, that kind of thing, this video is being recorded, so we will, if anyone missed anything or the internet quality wasn't perfect, that will all be resolved later. 1 second, just questions coming through. Oh yeah, so what is it about paint particularly that excites you compared to other disciplines?
I would say, gosh, I'm going to be a bit soppy about it. I think paint evokes so much character. I definitely envy the material. I remember that's what got me so excited about it. I think it's a way of translating color, but engaging with its physicality of it. And the lack of control, I honestly love that paint really does its own thing. Even if I'm making a painting, also probably the way that I paint means that I embrace a lack of control. but it's amazing how you can see a painting of something and you can be sitting next to the same scenery, but that painting will kind of evoke something in you. And it's definitely a romantic relationship with the material. Yeah, I stroke my paintings a lot too. I still think I'm understanding my relationship with the material, but yeah, paint is sexy. Paint is definitely very sexy to me. Yeah.
Great. Then we have another question saying someone loves the color of your wall and wondered if you could speak more about why you've chosen that particular color.
That's a good, I mean, I chose my wall color like I would if I was deciding to make a drawing, or it's intuitive. I love Farrow and Ball a lot as a paint as a paint company. So when I was thinking of what colors to paint the house, I went through the list and I picked the colors that drew to me the most. But also I thought a lot about the space as well. And there's a garden. There's like a door next to me with my garden and a window where you can see the garden too. And it was a relationship between this pink and the like purple tree outside. And yeah, basically it's part of a whole painting as a scene.
Cool. Someone else has a question that is about, I suppose, about sort of being a painter and being in the sort of commercial art world, and how do you strike a balance between painting for yourself and also making paintings for exhibitions and then to sell?
Oh wow, you know what? I feel very lucky because when I started, I'm just gonna mute my computer. That doesn't make sense. When I started I've always made work for myself, basically. I feel like I've always made works that I've really enjoyed. I'm so sorry about the dinging. And I would say that one thing that I've felt has been a real luxury in a sense, especially as an artist that does work with commercial galleries, is that because I started making work like this and people fell in love with my work for it being the way it is, I've never had to separate my work into two pools of personal and for exhibitions. I don't know if that's true for all artists. I hope most artists feel like they're making work that is purely for themselves, and that is the thing that, or is purely them, and that is the thing that attracts outwardly. But yeah, I think the only way it affects me in a sense is that I have deadlines in a sense, but at the same time, I've always enjoyed deadlines. I set personal deadlines for myself. I think I'm a bit of an obsessive worker anyway. So yeah, I think I answered that question.
Cool, yeah, brilliant. So I think we'll have just one more question. So the question is there a specific animation that's had a visual impact on your work? And, if not, maybe you could speak more broadly about, that kind of relationship and how sort of definitive, or what that sort of relationship consists of.
Okay. Specific animation is difficult, but I can list animations that I remember off the top of my head that I've looked at more than others, just because but it's never just the visuals, it's also the stories, it's also the music, it's everything together. But one is Mishishi, another one would be, oh gosh, no Japanese titles, Yola in April. Another one is Our New World, I think it's called. I could keep listing. But also, oh gosh, yeah, there's so many. No, I'll stop there because I think that, I hope someone asks me that question in another talk and I'll be prepared, definitely. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, but that was a really wonderful conversation, and I don't know, I feel like we could have kept listening for quite a lot longer. So yeah, it's a shame that we have to end. But I'm excited that I suppose it will continue in a form, because there's the exhibition next year, and obviously the relationship with Alex and the ICA will continue. So I encourage everyone to look out for that towards the end of next year. And thank you all for joining us today. And also make sure you take a look at Jade's new painting on our Basel booth. So thank you, Alex, thank you, Jade, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week, whatever time it is for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Sade. See you later.
Bye bye.